Hello everyone and welcome to .NET Core Central. In today's video, I am going to continue my discussion of basics of C# programming language, and today's video will be focused on while loops. In my last video, I spoke about for and for each loop, and both the for and for each loop mainly used for going through an array of item and doing certain operation. In case of for each, we can just iterate through the array itself, whereas for loop, we iterate through a number and we increment the number so that we can go to the next and so on and so forth. Whereas for while loop, it's a little bit different. While loop works on a condition, and the condition has to be true for while loop to execute. Once the condition becomes false, it will execute outside of the while loop. Whereas for as well as for each loop, the for will continue to execute as long as the count here does not match this condition. In case of for each, it will continue to execute as long as there is one item in the item array. So this is the main fundamental difference between for each and while. So now let's start with, if we have to change this implementation to while, how it will look like. So for that, we can change it to while, and then the count cannot be inside, so we can take the count outside. So we declare the count outside, and the count plus plus also cannot be here because we just need a conditional operation. Now if we run it like this, given that the count will be always 0, this will create an infinite loop. So what we can do is, we can do after this line of code here, we can enter, and then in the next line we can do the incrementing of the count, which will ensure that we do not get into an infinite loop inside of this while condition. So here we can just do count plus plus, and if we do count plus plus here, essentially it will ensure that inside of the loop the count is getting incremented, and eventually it will become less than the length and it will come out. So that is the fundamental implementation of while. Though while can be technically anything, so ultimately as long as it's a true, it will go inside while. But as I said, if you just give true, it will become an infinite while loop. And you can see here it is saying unreachable code because this will never exit this while. And similarly, if you give it as false, it will not even go inside. So here now it says this is unreachable because it will never come inside this code. And here you can put any imaginable condition here. So you can just do count if count is equal to 0, in which case also it will come inside because the first time will be true. Then it will increment it to 1, and then it will not execute anymore. So it will happen only one time. And then, as I said, if you say greater than or equal to 0, now, yes, first time it will come in, count is 0, so greater than or equal to 0, and then it will be 1 and 2 and so on and so forth. And in this case also, if you can see, it will become a continuous running loop. As we increment count, it will always be 0. If we don't do anything, then also it will be a infinite loop because count is not increasing, so it will always be greater than or equal to 0. So that is a while loop, and while loop can be really useful in scenarios where you don't have exact number of items that you want to iterate through, but based on a condition. Now one thing with while loop is, if the condition is not successful, your code will never be executed, which is fine for some type of scenario. But there are occasions where we might want to execute the code at least once, and then we want to get into the while loop. And this is where the do while code come in handy. So how the do while works is, first define a do statement, and in do statement you write your code, and here you can do the same thing. Count will be 0, so it will print something out, and then you can say while, and you can put your condition. So here you can say while count is less than items dot count, items dot length. And of course, if we just do this, it will execute while, it will come here, count will be less than length. But since we are not incrementing count, it will be an infinite loop. So we're just going to do count plus plus here, which will make sure that it executes the loop only till the length of the count, because we are starting from 0. But in this scenario, irrespective of whether the while will be true in the first case or not, the do will anyway execute. So first it will execute the do, then it will come in the while and check for the condition, and then go and execute the do again. So if the do becomes false, at least once it will execute, and then from the next time it is not going to execute. So this is the fundamental difference between a do while loop and a while loop. So there are scenarios where you want to use do while loop, and there are scenarios where you just want to use do loop. So that is the main difference. And as I mentioned, the difference between while loop or do while loop with for or for each is how the whole execution happens. For or for each loop, it is iterating through a number of items. In for each, it can be an array of object or array of number or whatever. In case of for loop, it's always iterating through a number of integer, which is incremented as a part of the for condition itself. Whereas in while condition, it is always determining a true or false statement, and based on the true or false statement, it is either executing the loop or it is not. And if you want to execute the loop at least once, irrespective of your condition in the while is success or not, in that case you use do while loop. So that is the fundamental of while and do while loop, and this is one of the really useful feature of any programming language, not just C#, but the syntax for other programming language of course will be different. Now what we can do is, you can see here I'm getting an error because the count is defined below. So I can just get the count. Here we should get rid of this error, and here we can just say count equal to 0. So we define the count, and then later on we can reset it to 0. Now I don't want to print this because I just want to show, and the arrays and jagged arrays, these are some things I defined earlier, so I'm going to leave them. Now here, as a part of this for each loop, we're just adding item to these values, which is an array, and here we're just going through the items count, which is this item, which is 2, and here also we are doing the same thing. So if I just print this, or if I just run this application, I should be able to see this printing twice. So here let's print out name, and the next one address. Set the count back to 0, and here again we want to make sure this do not cause any error because we are printing the count of item, so it will throw an index out of bound once it goes beyond 1. So we'll just make sure that we don't have this error. So we can say items dot length just to make sure it follows it doesn't get into any error. So now if we run this application, we should see the expected behavior of it'll print XA for the first two name and then YB for the second two address. If you remember, first and second address. X and A are the name, Y and B are address. Here we printed name, here we printed address. So it did exactly that. The do while loop and the while loop. Now here for the do while loop, if we just change this condition and if we say if count is, let's say, less than equal to 0, right? In which case this is a false condition. So if we just do count is less than equal to 0, we should see here it is printing out at least once the name, which will be the first one. And here if we give the same condition while, it is not going to print out the address. So let's run the application now. And once we run, we can see it printed out X, which is part of the do while because it executed at least once. Whereas for the next while loop, where we are doing less than 0 and trying to print the address, it never printed the address, which is expected. So that is all I wanted to cover for today's video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you are new to my channel, you think you are getting value out of my channel, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.